You know, it's not every day that a story from 80 years ago suddenly makes headlines, but that's exactly what's happening with a group of absolutely incredible women who served in World War II. Today, we're going to unpack the long overlooked story of the Army and Navy nurses of that war and why their fight is suddenly more relevant than ever. So you have to ask, why now? I mean, the war ended in 1945. What could possibly be bringing their story back into the spotlight in our modern world? Well, the answer lies in a brand new effort to give them an honor that is, frankly, long overdue. And there it is. A bill was just introduced in Congress to award these women, as a group, the Congressional Gold Medal. Now, this act isn't just some dry piece of legislation. It's a huge spotlight, and it's illuminating a story of bravery and inequality that has been kept in the shadows for way, way too long. To really get why this medal is so important, we have to rewind the clock. We have to go back to the very beginning, to a time when the call to duty for these women was anything but equal. Okay, just look at these numbers. It's kind of staggering. Before the war, the U.S. had just a few thousand military nurses. But when war was declared, tens of thousands answered the call. We're talking over 59,000 in the Army Nurse Corps and another 14,000 in the Navy Nurse Corps. And remember, these women weren't drafted. They were all volunteers, stepping right up to serve. But the system they were walking into was fundamentally unjust. And it all boiled down to this one term: relative rank. See, a law from 1920 gave nurses the right to wear the uniform, to wear the insignia, but it explicitly denied them any actual military status. So they looked like officers, they sure worked like officers, but when it came down to it, they just weren't treated like them. And this right here just lays out the consequences perfectly. Because they didn't have official status, these women received only half the pay of their male counterparts, and they were denied all veteran benefits. Just think about that. They were heading into the same war zones, facing the exact same dangers, but for a fraction of the pay and with absolutely zero benefits to back them up.
But all that inequality, it didn't stop them for a second. They served under some of the most harrowing conditions you can possibly imagine, right there on the front lines.
This timeline really shows the sheer endurance of these women. Take the nurses in the Philippines. They were ordered to the Bataan Peninsula to set up emergency hospitals from scratch. In just the first month, they treated over 1,000 surgical casualties. Then, their hospital was bombed, and they carried on. And when the U.S. surrendered, 67 of them were captured and held as prisoners of war for 37 months. That's over 3 years, and they continued to care for the sick and wounded even in captivity. This quote, and it's taken right from the bill itself, it just paints a stunning picture. Can you imagine this scene in North Africa? These nurses, wearing helmets, carrying their packs of medical supplies, wading ashore while under enemy fire. They had no weapons, only what they needed to save lives, and they walked straight into the fight. And then you have a place like Anzio in Italy. The field hospitals, which were clearly marked with large red crosses, were deliberately and repeatedly shelled by the Germans. The nurses had to dig foxholes under their cots just for protection. The area became known as Hell's Half Acre. And right in the middle of that hell, they cared for more than 33,000 patients. But, for so many of these women, the war wasn't just against the Axis powers. They were fighting a second war at the exact same time, a war against discrimination right here at home. 56. What does that number mean? Well, at the start of the war, thousands of fully qualified African-American nurses applied to serve, but because of racial segregation, the Army Nurse Corps capped their enlistment with a quota. That quota was just 56 nurses. And this story of patriotism in the face of prejudice, it just keeps going. You had Japanese American women who joined the Nurse Cadet Corps to serve the United States, even while their own families were being forced into internment camps. You had Chinese American nurses serving on incredibly dangerous missions with the legendary Flying Tigers over the Himalayas. They all served a country that didn't fully recognize them as equals. So despite all these obstacles, their impact was absolutely profound. Let's take a look at their incredible legacy and the long, hard fight for the recognition they deserved. Okay, get ready for this because it is, without a doubt, one of the most staggering statistics of the entire war. Of all the American soldiers who were wounded and actually received medical care, fewer than 4% died. Let that sink in for a second. And that unbelievable number is directly connected to the work of these nurses. That astonishingly low mortality rate was possible because of their skilled care, their willingness to be right at the front lines, and their unwavering dedication. They weren't just providing comfort, they were a decisive factor in saving countless, countless lives. But their fight for equality, it didn't end when the war did. Oh no, it was a long road, as you can see here. They started with that totally unequal relative rank. Then, in 1944, Congress finally granted them temporary military rank for the rest of the war. But it wasn't until 1947, 2 years after the war was over, that they were finally given permanent officer status with equal pay and benefits. And that brings us right back to where we started, full circle, from their past struggles to this present-day effort to honor them in a truly significant way. So what exactly is the Congressional Gold Medal? Well, it's not just another award. It is Congress's single highest expression of national appreciation. It's been given to people like George Washington, the Wright brothers, Rosa Parks. It is reserved for those whose contributions have had a massive and lasting impact on American history. And that's really the heart of this bill. It argues that the extraordinary service of these women, who faced down inequality, served under fire, and saved an incredible number of lives, is absolutely deserving of this belated but highest form of recognition. It's just such a powerful story of courage and resilience, and it really leaves us with a question to think about. As we finally look to honor these heroes from our past, who are the unsung heroes of our own time? Whose contributions might we be overlooking today?